Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Shaq Fu, brought to us by Electronic Arts. Shaq Fu is a fighting game featuring NBA Hall of Famer Shaquille O'Neal and happens to be the game where I get, well, my name from. Shaq Fu is infamous for being one of the worst fighting games ever, but it's one of those ones I loved from my childhood because Shaq was my favorite basketball player, and I was one of those kids that even wanted to see the Shaq movies like Kazam in theaters. The game has multiple modes, including a tournament mode, a one-on-one matchup mode, as well as the story mode. And that's what I'll be completing here, the main story mode, where you get to play as Shaq, going through an adventure, facing off with each of the game's characters, and eventually the final boss in set. After changing the difficulty over to hard, which doesn't affect anything as far as ending or cutscenes are concerned, but we jump into the story mode. As we make it into second world, we'll drop onto the world map. You get to select which of the first 3 levels you want to complete in any order. Once you complete those levels, you'll open up a bridge to the second area where you have 2 more fights, and then we move on to the final boss. The Super Nintendo version has far less characters than the Sega Genesis version, and thus a much shorter story mode. Like a lot of fighting games, there are special moves you can pull off. The problem is, Shaq's special moves aren't all that useful and actually pull off really slow, and because of this, they aren't really effective for helping you in most fights. My main strategy is kicking, and some more kicking, but you kind of learn how to implement this the best way possible. You have 2 buttons that represent kick, and we're going to be using the more powerful kick most of the time. Usually though, if I do a lunging, jumping high kick, I'm going to be using the other weaker kick because it has a different kind of reach on it that can end up knocking enemies out of the air. My main goal usually is to get a character into the corner and then pummel them as much as I can and hopefully be able to get them to stay there so I can beat them, but if they get away or I knock myself too far away because of their blocks, I'll then do a big sweeping kick until that is too far and then usually close right back in and try to jump attack them once again. Shaq's 2 special moves that you are able to do are down forward kick, which is a spinning fire roundhouse kick, but because it's so slow, it most of the time ends up missing or doesn't even end up getting anywhere near done before the enemy hits you, as well as you have the forward back forward punch, which is a kind of like disc-like move that Shaq's able to throw out, and it actually is pretty effective. The problem is pulling off the combo of forward back forward and then punch is very finicky on the SNES controller, so it can be a lot difficult to do. After leaving the battle against Kaori, we now move down a little bit and battle against Raja in the next place. He has a few different special moves he's able to pull off, including the blades into the ground causing kind of a shockwave-like move. And most of the time, just like before with Kaori, my goal is to try to get him into the corner if possible. What makes the game so difficult is the fury. When you end up getting attacks done to you, even if you block them, your fury ends up building up. When a character is in fury mode and they're able to land some attacks, it does a ton of damage. So sometimes when beating up on my opponents, they'll go in the rage mode and be able to beat me in just 2 or 3 hits in total because of how much power they end up having. Unfortunately, there isn't a ton of other strategy I've been able to find out through the years, especially trying to beat the game on the hardest setting. Easy and normal, you can spam a little bit of your other moves a bit better, but on hard it's a lot more difficult to actually be able to pull off the moves quickly and efficiently enough, other than the strategy that I've been trying to do throughout this run so far, and that is kick, and more kicks. While Shaq is the main character and hero of the game, he actually is one of the weakest characters due to the fact he doesn't have as many special moves and they are so slow to pull off. In versus matchups, it's actually difficult to win as Shaq if someone knows what they're doing with the other characters. With Raja defeated, we're going to head downwards to Gargoyle's Peak and end up battling the next opponent. Now, as this battle begins, once again, we're going to try to knock him back into the wall. He'll be able to teleport. He can summon lightning from above to crash down on your head, which you can sometimes get away from if you do a nicely timed jump. He also has that lightning that's going to come straight out towards you, and then he has these big, giant, wave-like blade attacks he's able to do in the air that also can do quite a bit of damage. He also is pretty speedy, but honestly I find him and Raja a lot easier to beat than Kaori because they don't have quite as much speed as she has. One other thing that you do have in your disposal is the shield, which can end up blocking and absorbing projectile moves. The thing is, you're weak against physical moves when you're doing the shield, so if I see an enemy doing it, I just run up to him and try to hit him with the most powerful kick I can. While for many, they hate Shaq Fu because it really isn't that great of a fighting game, but because of all the nostalgia, I've always really actually kind of enjoyed the game, though it is extremely frustrating to face off against the computer in the story mode without losing a matchup. I've speedrun Shaq Fu many times over the years, and it's difficult to try to get through, and especially complete the final boss. The AI is just absolutely cheap and relentless at times. After completing that first area, we now head across the bridge and go to the Lost Jungle. There's really not a whole lot going on the second island, but in the Genesis version, since you have a lot more characters to fight, there's a lot more places to visit on the map. I think only the Sega Genesis and Amiga versions of Shaq Fu have the most amount of characters, the complete roster, whereas the SNES and Game Boy versions have 7, and the Game Gear version only has 6 characters to fight. Next up is our battle against Voodoo. It's very similar to the other fights, as you can see, just trying to knock her back into the corner. I usually find her easier, though, to deal with and being able to land a few more hits than on some of the other fights throughout the course of the story mode. That could, of course, just be complete luck, but usually I don't have too much trouble defeating her. Voodoo does have a few interesting moves, including summoning a hawk that she'll be able to throw at you, but thankfully we can just kind of keep her at bay by keeping her close to the wall a lot of this fight. The farther the AI is away from you, the more often it seems like they pull off some of their special moves, so if you're able to stay a little bit close to them and keep attacking them, they don't have the opportunity to pull off some of their more devastating maneuvers. After we take down Voodoo, we're now moving on to the next fight, and the second to last one of the game. Next up is Beast, who's basically Set's right-hand man, and this is a really tough fight. When he gets into Fury, you really have to be careful, and it won't take too many blocks and attacks on him in order to get him into that Fury mode, as it fills up so quickly here on the hard mode. Beast has some really devastating moves, and with Fury, if he hits any of them, he can drain almost your entire health bar in a hit or two. It's the kind of fight where it's very easy for it to go the complete opposite way at any point, so even though I'm slowly draining his health, one move from him and he could win the fight at this point. Round number 2 during this fight is a good example of how it can go badly, as unfortunately I end up getting hit right off the bat with a couple of his special moves, and you see how much damage he was able to do with just that one special move. So even though I'm able to get a few hits in here, it's not long before I end up dying in this fight and have to take the battle to round number 3. As I begin the fight, I'm going to try to do a couple of sweep kicks, knocking him at least a little bit away. Because he falls so far back, if you do the sweep kick to him, this allows us to get closer to that left or right wall and be able to start dishing those attacks. There isn't, unfortunately, a 100% fail-proof attack plan for these battles. It really does come down to a lot of luck. So many times have I ended up having a run completely die just because I ended up having just a little bit of bad luck near the end. Now it's time for the final boss fight against Set, and he is absolutely no joke. He has a couple of really devastating moves. He has a spinning electrical move he does in the air when he jumps, but he usually, when he does a longer jump, does instead a giant, like, spinning blade of death that can deal a lot of hits to you in rapid fashion. He has a move where he's able to send out his bandages straight out in front of him that can also do pretty good damage, as well as you can see, he can teleport all around. He does like to use his shield a lot though, and this will allow you to kind of get in and deliver either a kick or a sweep kick to him, which can do a bit more damage. One other move he'll do is he will throw his fist into the ground and cause a bandage to kind of pop up wherever you're standing, and this is a great opportunity if you're quick enough to do a jumping move to him in order to do a little bit of damage. He also has a fireball move that he's able to throw out as well, just an absolute ton of arsenal that Set has. As you can see, this fight ends up coming down to the absolute wire because I'm unable to just hit him one more time. He's down to one hit, but I'm unable to do it, but thankfully I just barely survive and end up winning round 1 by a timeout. As round number 2 begins, it's more of the same. Once again, I'm going to try to get him into the corner if possible. You want to try to stop him from doing a lot of his special moves. Unfortunately, sometimes when I do the jumps, I end up getting on the opposite side that I don't want to be on of the enemy, but you're going to have to be relentless even when that happens, and just try to keep laying into the attacks. Like I said, I'm pretty much just trying to keep attacking him so that he doesn't end up getting too much opportunity to pull off those special moves. Especially if he's in Fury mode, it's pretty much going to be like a one-hit death at this point. Thankfully, with a little bit of luck, I'm able to just barely survive through the round. I'm unable to finish him though, but we still get the win and get to sit back and enjoy the ending of Shaq Fu on the Super Nintendo. So there you have it, Shaq Fu for the Super Nintendo. And like I said, it's not that good of a game by any means. It's a bad fighting game, but because of the nostalgia that goes with it for me, I will always end up liking Shaq Fu. I also do plan on playing through most of the other versions of the game over the next couple of months. So I do plan on doing the Sega Genesis, Game Boy, and Game Gear versions down the road just to have them all completed and up on my channel. I have to say also that the video that plays in the background, the demo fight of Shaq and Kaori, is potentially the best fighting that this game really can end up offering. You can also see some of Shaq's special moves going on in the background. Like I said, during normal gameplay, they are so hard to pull off consistently and fast enough. Like, they're extremely finicky when pulling them off. For a Super Nintendo game, it definitely has quite the lengthy credit crawl at the end of it. Once the credits end up finishing up though, you go back to the main menu and you can start the Shaq Fu goodness all over again. But with that, guys, it's going to wrap up this episode of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.